Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space, said Viktor Frankl, lies our freedom to choose. Today, I want to give you a way to find that space on demand, especially when life gets noisy, when it gets loud. I call it the S.P.A.C.E method. Stop, pay attention, align, commit, energize. It's simple enough to use in 2 minutes between meetings, but deep enough to change the way you navigate pressure. And it sits comfortably alongside the science of psychological flexibility, what acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, has measured for decades. Let's start with why any of this matters. Under pressure, your brain prefers speed over wisdom. The amygdala flags threat. Your heart rate rises, your attention narrows, and the body prepares for action. This is perfect if a car swerves towards you or a lion enters the room, but it's costly if a colleague says something sharp in a meeting or a loved one pushes a button that has a long history. Most of us already know the advice. Take a deep breath, think it through, choose your response. But knowing is not doing. The S.P.A.C.E method is the bridge between the two. S stands for stop. The first move is interruption. You notice the hook, the pattern, the hook. Your shoulders tighten, your jaw clenches, the thought that wants to sprint out of your mouth, and instead you pause. One slow inhale and a longer exhale. Remember, long exhalations stimulate the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system through vagal pathways. They gently nudge the arousal down. Reviews of slow-paced and controlled breathing show reliable reductions in anxiety and improvements in heart rate variability, which is your body's readiness signal for calm control. More recently, brief daily breath protocols with an emphasis on extended exhale, sometimes called cyclic sighing, have shown larger benefits for mood and autonomic balance than mindfulness alone in randomized comparisons. Now, think of the stop as switching the gear from reflex to choice. It's not dramatic, it's not a performance. It is one breath that tells your biology, we are safe enough to choose. P stands for pay attention. This is where you turn toward your inner experience, that inner landscape, with curiosity rather than control. You notice the sensations in your chest, the heat in your face, the tightness in your throat or shoulders. You notice the words your mind is offering, words like unfair, always, never, and you name what you find. I'm feeling anxious. I am angry. I'm telling myself this will go badly. And this simple act of labeling has a measurable effect in the brain. In a well-known study, Matthew Lieberman and colleagues showed that affect labeling, which is putting feelings into words, reduces amygdala activation and increases prefrontal engagement. You're not trying to erase your emotions or argue with your thoughts. You are just relating to them differently. In ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, this is called acceptance and cognitive diffusion, allowing internal experience to be present without letting it steer the wheel. From the outside, it looks like nothing. On the inside, it is the moment you stop being pushed by the river and start steering the boat. A is for align. Now that you have space and awareness, you ask a question that most of us skip in real time. Which of my top values can guide me right now? If your values are creativity, kindness, and fitness, alignment might mean proposing an unconventional option, being creative, or choosing a generous interpretation of someone's behavior, or taking a brief walk before you reply. Values are not slogans, they are directions that make effort feel worthwhile. A large body of research shows that brief values affirmations buffer stress, reduce defensiveness, and improve persistence under pressure. Jeffrey Cohen and David Sherman summarized this in their review on self-affirmation theory, and the effects have been demonstrated across contexts, from academic performance to health and behavior change. The mechanism, it isn't magic, it's meaning. When you remember who you want to be, the next step becomes clearer, and the cost of taking it feels smaller. You are activating and aligning with your values in real time. C is commit. Choose one action you can take now that fits the value you just named. Send that measured reply. Ask the honest question you've been avoiding. Maybe just step outside for 2 minutes of light and air. If you're in a difficult conversation, commit to one sentence that moves the dialogue forward without sacrificing your integrity. ACT calls this committed action, behavior guided by values taken in the presence of whatever thoughts and feelings show up. The evidence for ACT is solid and wide. Meta-analyses have found that ACT improves psychological flexibility and reduces distress across multiple conditions and populations. The point is not to feel different before you act. The point is to act in the service of what matters and let the feelings catch up. E is energize. Remember, pressure drains the system, and drained systems make poorer choices. So you need to deliberately restore. Take a handful of those longer exhale breaths, drink some water, step into daylight, which supports circadian regulation. If it is evening and your mind is buzzing, reduce blue light exposure to support melatonin and sleep. Research has repeatedly shown that evening blue-enriched light can suppress melatonin and delay circadian timing. If you recharge through connection, send a quick message to someone who steadies you, or book a coffee date. These micro practices are not luxuries. They are part of performance hygiene. And when you treat recovery as optional, you make values-based action optional too. Let's put this together in a real scene. Imagine you open your inbox and see a message that feels unfair. You've asked that person not to do this, and there it goes again. Your chest tightens, the story in your head leaps to courtroom mode. We're judging. Stop. One breath in, a longer breath out. Pay attention. There's tension in my chest, heat in my ears, the thought that they don't respect me. Kindness and courage. What does kindness look like here? What does courage look like? Commit. I'll ask 3 clarifying questions before I offer a solution, and I'll choose words that keep the relationship intact. Energize. You stand, you walk to the window, 3 long exhalations, catch the daylight for 60 seconds, and then you write. The email you send is different from the one you were about to fire off. The outcome is different. Most importantly, so is the story you tell yourself about who you are. Now, let me add a bit of my own path here. I've spent years teaching resilience, well-being, and performance skills to organizations and communities all around the world. In that time, I noticed a pattern. You can be highly resilient, yet still feel somewhat off course. You can be productive and still feel hollow. Values are the missing piece that makes all the other skills cohere. When I live my values, for example, creativity, kindness, fitness, each day has a certain shape to it. If I create something, offer a gesture of kindness, and move my body, there's a hum of rightness, like the strings of a guitar tuned into resonance. That feeling doesn't end the chaos of life, but it changes my relationship with it. The S.P.A.C.E method is how I find the resonance in those moments that matter. You might be wondering, isn't this just mindfulness? And in part, the answer is yes. The stop and pay attention pieces draw directly from mindfulness. Noticing, naming, returning. But S.P.A.C.E puts equal weight on values, behavior, and physiology. Align pulls your compass into the conversation. Commit translates intention into a single step you can take right now. It gives you agency. Energize respects the biology that either supports or sabotages your best intentions. It is mindfulness with a direction and a finish line and a quick refuel on the way. Another question I sometimes hear is whether this is evidence-based or just a nice idea with an acronym. The acronym is TIDY on purpose because tidy things are usable in messy moments, but the moves themselves are grounded in good science. We've talked about affect labeling, calming the amygdala. We've talked about breath protocols and long exhalations, improving autonomic balance. Values affirmations, when brief and well-timed, can improve performance and reduce stress response. And there's a fascinating literature on stress mindsets led by Alia Crum and colleagues, showing that believing stress can be enhancing when paired with strategies and meaning, changes how the body and mind respond to pressure. You are not pretending stress is pleasant. You are choosing to view it as a signal and a resource, and then you are using S.P.A.C.E to convert that signal into values-aligned action. At this point, I think it's important to quickly touch on sleep and recovery, because recovery is often where our best intentions break. If you want access to choice tomorrow, protect your sleep tonight. The research on evening light and melatonin is not new, but it is consistently overlooked in modern life. Bright, blue, heavy light in the evening delays melatonin and pushes your sleep window later, often without you even noticing it until you wake up depleted. If you have an important conversation in the morning, part of your S.P.A.C.E is done the night before by reducing bright screens, dimming the environment, and letting your biology do what it does well when we stop getting in the way. There's also a social dimension worth naming. Values rarely live in isolation. If one of your core values is belonging or kindness, Energize might mean asking for help or apologizing quickly. That move is not weakness, it's alignment. And the research on social support and stress buffering is enormous. But you don't need a citation to recognize the relief of saying, I'm struggling with this. Can I run it by you? The quality of your next action often improves the moment you stop handling it alone. Now, let's return to ACT for a final moment, because I want to acknowledge that S.P.A.C.E stands on that giant's shoulders. ACT measures psychological flexibility, your ability to stay in contact with the present moment, open up to internal experience, and take action guided by your values. Across dozens of randomized trials and several meta-analyses, psychological flexibility predicts better mental health, improved work performance, and more satisfying relationships. What S.P.A.C.E offers is a pocket-sized routine that expresses those principles step by step. It gives you a script for the moment your hands start to shake and your mind narrows to a single story. Pause the story. Name what's here. Remember what matters. Do one thing that fits. Refill the tank. If you want to practice, pick a small, predictable stressor. Choose the meeting, the pickup time, the inbox moment. Rehearse space before you go in. See the stop. How will you do it? Feel the breath. Practice. Hear yourself say, pause. Imagine naming your emotion without apologizing for it. Picture the value rising to the surface like a compass needle setting north. Choose a single sentence or step. See yourself step away for that minute of daylight or 3 long exhalations. Then run the experiment in real life and notice the difference. It's not about perfection. It's not about being a saint. It's just a little more coherence between who you are and what you do, especially in those moments that matter. If you're thinking, what if I forget in the heat of the moment? That's why we practice when the seas are calm. Put your top 3 values on your phone lock screen. Write SPACE on a sticky note where you work. Teach it to someone you care about, because teaching builds up your own skill. The goal isn't to become a statue of serenity. The goal is to recover choice faster, to reduce the number of times you say, I wish I hadn't sent that message. I wish I hadn't shouted at my toddler. I wish I hadn't driven up alongside that vehicle and thrown some signs out of the window. Because regret is on the other side of the spectrum from fulfillment. So how can we reduce the amount of regret that we will suffer over the course of our lives? How can we increase the number of times we say, that was hard and I'm proud of how I handled it? That's growth. So here is what I hope you take from this video. Stress isn't the enemy. Misalignment is. The feeling of being split between the person you want to be and the reaction that escaped your mouth. That is what burns. The SPACE method is a way to stitch the split in real time. Stop so you can see. Pay attention so you can understand. Align so you can remember why you're here. Commit so your values have substance. Energize so you can do it again tomorrow. If you want help clarifying your top values and getting a personal plan for putting them into action, I've built a free values assessment that will give you a profile, a values archetype, and practical ways to live this, not just learn it. But even if you never take another assessment in your life, you can use SPACE today. One breath, one name, one value, one step, one reset. Sometimes the difference between a regret and a moment you're proud of is smaller than you think. It's exactly the size of the space that you create. Thank you for being here. If this helped, feel free to share it with someone who might need it this week. And let me know how your first SPACE experiment goes. I read all of the messages, and until next time, take care and take space, especially when it matters most.